My name's Adam. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. And my sobriety date is July 24th of 2019. It's been a while since I've told my story. I guess we'll start at the beginning. Sometime in February of 1968, my parents had sex and life began for me. And when I came out, I don't think they were too much ready for me. I was my mom's first son. She was raising two of my full-blooded sisters and a stepbrother and a stepsister when I came along. I've got 5 brothers and sisters. I have one brother behind me. I was born in Cincinnati, and I don't claim it. I say I'm Yankee by birth, Southern by the grace of God. I don't have any memory of it. When I was 1.5, 2 years old, we moved to Cincinnati, or we moved to Kansas and lived in a town called Osawatomie. And its claim to fame was that's where the state mental hospital was. And my dad was chief of staff at that mental hospital. He's a psychiatrist. I lived there until I was about 4 years old. And one of my first memories, which is kind of apropos for me, was being completely infuriated. It was winter, and there was a bunch of, and snow was like this high, and my mom had bundled me up like the kid from Christmas Story, and I went out to play in the snow with my sisters, and they left me in the middle of this. I mean, Kansas is nothing but fields, and they left me in this snowdrift and just took off, and I'm having to climb over, snowdrifts. And one of my first memories ever in my life is just being absolutely infuriated that I was left behind. And it's kind of weird that anger has always followed me. Anger issues have always followed me throughout the years. When I was 5 years old, we moved to Columbus, Georgia, and I lived there until I was about 16 years old. Columbus was great for me. My mother was a psychiatric nurse when she met my father, and when we got to Columbus when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, she got into the laundromat business, so she became a business owner and owned several really large laundromats all around Columbus. And my dad was a psychiatrist at this West Georgia Regional Hospital. That's the reason we moved, for him to be chief of staff there when they had just built it. So, we grew up in nice neighborhoods, never went without. I didn't really realize that we weren't wealthy by any means, but we were well off. But, I didn't have any concept of money or whatnot. But, we lived in a big house. We lived on a lake. My life consisted of fishing every day, water skiing about 9 months out of the year, usually twice a day. Sometimes we get up before we go to school and, hit the water when there's fog on glass water, and it was just beautiful. So my life was pretty good. I'm going to say this. People that know me, my story has a lot of drugs in it. I tell people, don't worry. I smoke crack alcoholically. So, I'm going to jump around. But my first attempt at really getting sober was 2001. I got out of prison, and I was living in East Cobb, and I was going to East Cobb meetings, and I really gravitated towards AA meetings. And my first home group was Bishop Lake Group. And if anybody knows that, Helen R. from Central Office, she kind of led that meeting. So she was singleness of purpose. So if you mention marijuana or anything, she would either tell you to leave the meeting or tell you after the meeting to never come back, or never say anything. But I learned to talk about the disease through there, and that was my home group for about a year and a half before I moved. So my story does have a lot of drugs in it. Anyway, back to Columbus. My first taste of alcohol came when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. My dad was Polish. He was born in Poland. He fought in World War II. He was an extremely brilliant man on one aspect. He could speak 10 languages fluently. During the war, he escaped 3 Nazi detention camps, not concentration camps, but like prisoner of war camps, to go and fight against the Nazis and stuff. But, he was born in 1921. So, his tradition in being in Europe is, people drank. So at Christmas, we got to drink wine. We got to drink a glass of wine at Christmas Eve dinner. And I remember, I remember the first time I took a glass, drank the glass of wine, and my dad drank like Gallo wine in a big jug, but I remember feeling the warm, fuzzy feeling, and I'm like, why wait until next Christmas? So when I was, 10 or 12, my parents entertained a lot, and they had a liquor cabinet. There's really no alcoholics in my family, nobody, no issues but me. I'm definitely was the black sheep. But, we started, my brother and my brother is a little bit younger, 14 months younger than me. So we would, nip off the alcohol, and, over the years, they started having some really smooth vodka because it was mostly water, but, when I was 7 years old, I was sexually abused by a female family friend, and it continued for about 6 years, and it had a really instrumental part in my upbringing and life and stuff. And about a year into it, there was a situation where my dad walked in on what was going on, and it was obvious what was going on, and but nothing was done about it, and life kind of went on. And it's just until recently that I've kind of really addressed that. In any kind of run of sobriety and working the steps, I've always left that part out of my 5th step, because that was kind of my deepest, darkest secret. And I've learned that that shining light on that takes the power away from it, and definitely I'm open to sharing it. It doesn't bother me anymore. Lots of times, when I do share it, I'm not the Lone Ranger when it comes to shit like that happening. But I've learned in this run of sobriety that it's had such a paramount, it's caused me a lot of problems in life, relationships, and problems with authority and whatnot. But that continued until I was about 13 years old, and then it kind of ended abruptly. And along the way, I kind of started enjoying it, and it was awkward and weird, and it's part of my story. So when I was from day one of kindergarten, I fucking hated school. I hated everything about school, and I loathed the Jerry Lewis telethon, because that meant school started the next day. I don't think I can handle going to school in July like the kids do now, but I hated school from kindergarten all the way to graduation. I struggled through school. I was a straight D student. A C was like an A to me. On the flip side, all my siblings were AB students who graduated honor rolls. I graduated from summer school. I went to summer school most every year from about 8th grade on. I think I skipped it in 10th grade. I cheated through school. I hated it. The big deal with my parents was like, when it came time for finals, my teacher would say, you got to make like a 82 to pass my class. And I mean, to make the lowest D possible. I'm like, 82, So, I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't like anything about it. I didn't like the authority side of it. I didn't like, studying. I didn't like, I was into science and whatnot, but I wanted to fish and water ski, that's what I wanted to do. And it hindered me from that. So, I always got in trouble in school. I was always in the principal's office. This was back during corporal punishment. Sorry. But I got paddled almost a couple times a week. I was getting paddled by the vice principal. So, I started, really drinking, sneaking beers and drinking. And, when I was in, 7th, 8th grade, 12 years old or so, and smoked weed around that time. I did, about 14. I tried cocaine. My sister went through a little spurt. She's not an addict or alcoholic, but she went through a little experimentation period when she went to college. And if I caught her doing something, she'd do it with me. So, and that's how I experienced, smoking marijuana and, doing cocaine once. And, we moved up here and we moved to Marietta. And, when I turned 16 and I grew up, I finished school in East Cobb at Wheeler. And, I got out. The only reason I really finished school was I got out early for work. I worked only, I think I had to work 15 hours. I only worked 15 hours. And, just kind of drifted through life without a rudder. I also became kind of a thief, because, when my mom owned a bunch of laundromats. So at any given time, we had like 3 5-gallon buckets full of quarters, nickels, and dimes from the vending. And this was back during the Donkey Kong, every corner had an arcade. And so, I mean, it was nothing to me, just get handfuls of quarters and go to the arcade all day. So I didn't think about, I didn't really, I don't know if I justified stealing or that maybe I deserved it, but, I just always grew up kind of, doing what I wanted to and asking for forgiveness later. That was kind of my motive. And I was a problem. I was definitely a problem, and my parents really didn't know how to deal with me because everyone else in the family was golden, So, I graduated high school, and I'd stopped using for a little while in high school or drinking. I had gotten involved in Young Life and youth groups and whatnot, but my senior year, spring break, went to Panama City just like everybody else and started smoking weed again, and that kind of started the long demise of where life went. I started smoking weed, drinking a little bit, and had good times, I mean, it wasn't horrible, got in trouble here and there for, minor possessions, whatnot. I used to get a lot of speeding tickets. I drove My first car was a 69 GTO convertible. My second car was a 71 442 Hurst Olds convertible. So I was a target for Cobb County Police, although I was driving 50 plus miles over the speed limit a lot of times. So, I graduated high school and I graduated high school in summer school. I got talked into graduating because I was going to really drop out by a friend of mine who was older. And then I was working in restaurants. I was working pulling wrenches, working in some mechanic shops, learning how to hot rod cars and stuff. And I was going nowhere fast. I got in a relationship with a girl who I moved in with. It was the first girl I ever lived with. And she was in nursing school, very driven, very, was already talking about getting married. She was about 3 years older than me. And, I kind of ruined that relationship because I just like to have fun and party all the time. And eventually she got tired of me being a child and moved on. And, so about 2 years after high school, my parents, I had a nephew who was younger than me that wanted to go to this culinary school, in Charleston, Johnson & Wales University. So my parents, never really pushed college, and they never really pushed, you got to make good grades and all this, that, and the other. It was just automatic for the rest of my siblings to do so. So we went and checked out this college, and at the time I had just broken up with this girl, and my parents offered to put me in the college, and you didn't have to have SAT score or anything. It was kind of vocational college. So I'm like thinking, they're going to pay for me to go to college. They're going to pay for me to live there. I don't have to work for 2 years, and I just have to go to school. And I already know what, I've been cooking for years in restaurants. So I went there, and I did very, very well in college. I ended up staying almost 3 years, and I got 2 different associate's degrees, one in culinary arts, one in food and beverage management. I didn't have a bachelor's program back then. But I joke about it. I say I went there to be a chef, and I graduated a drug dealer because when I got there, I started selling marijuana. When I got to college, my drug use really took off. It started off, well, if I bought an ounce of weed and sold 3, I could smoke for free. And then, that it started going to higher amounts of stuff. And then I started getting into hallucinogenics, mushrooms and acid. And, I was the guy that, I don't know if I was like, when I showed up at a party, it was like the party was started because Adam was here. 1, I had the drugs, and 2, I usually did more than anybody else around. I don't know if you remember Sam Kennison used to have a skit about that. It was like, he'd be, I was like the Sam Kennison of my college. So, after I graduated with like a 3.96. I pursued my career in drug dealing more than culinary arts, and I got busted a year later. How much time I got? Okay, so anyway, I got busted a year later for I'd started selling ecstasy. I got busted, and that kind of ended my career. It was the first time I got locked up. They wanted me to do a considerable amount of time, and I had accumulated some money in my sales to kind of pay off a lawyer and a judge to not go to prison. And I got 3 years of probation. But on those 3 years, that's when my drinking really took off. I went to rehab because my lawyer said I needed to go to rehab, and I went to First Step, which used to be on Hawkins Store Road right here behind the Methodist Church. It was like a 42-day program. The day I got out, my brother was a bartender at the TGI Fridays at the Prado, which is now gone. And I went there and ordered a Budweiser, and my drinking career for the next 4 years took off because I was on probation. I was scared that I would go to prison if I tested positive. So that's when alcohol really came into play. I went through the whole thing of I drank nothing but wine for a while. I drank nothing but vodka, nothing but gin, back to beer, over those years. And I never really got into the culinary field. I learned how to hang wallpaper, and back when wallpaper was popular, and I did that for a long time. And I never really turned it into a profitable business. I just kind of survived. I got in a relationship with another girl who had just graduated from University of Georgia and was very professional. Was an editor of a magazine. At 23 years old, I guess. We were 22, 23. And she was like the love of my life at the time. And again, she got tired of me being a kid and moved on. And when we broke up, I started doing cocaine. And the person I was contracting for doing wallpaper, her husband sold cocaine. So I started getting paid in cocaine, which was, cut out the middleman, but it made life worse for me. And in 1996, one night out of the blue, I went and a buddy of mine who this is all the drugs parts, but a buddy of mine, every now and then a group of my close friends, we'd do cocaine, and one of the guys who messed around with crack some we'd freebase at the end of the night. Well, he had told me that he went to some motel off Howell Mill Road and spent all night smoking crack, and I ended up there by myself and went into a room and smoked some crack, and 2 weeks later I realized that I'd been going there for 2 weeks every night smoking crack, and I was a crackhead. And that's when life really, really went downhill. I quit working. I turned into a thief. I learned how to do a lot of forgery, credit card fraud. On the street, if you write checks on the street, they call you a paper hanger. So I was a paper hanger in the real world, and in the dark world, I was a paper hanger too. My addiction, I had it got to about a $400 or $500 a day habit. So obviously I was stealing everything to work. And in 99, after in and out of jail, I went to prison for the first time. When I got to prison, I stayed clean. For some weird reason, when I go to jail, I get clean. So went to prison and got clean and got out, and I had a 10-year run of sobriety. I got a sponsor after I got out, so I had 2 years clean when I got out. I got a sponsor when I got clean. I worked some of the steps. I never really worked all through the 12 steps. I left out the whole abuse part. And and life was good. I got married. I adopted my wife at the time. I adopted her daughter. I started a halfway house about in 2005 or 2006. I had the opportunity to buy a house, and I kind of felt a calling to help other people and stuff. So I got into running halfway houses, and it kind of exploded. And within 9 months, I had 6 houses in 3 different locations in Cobb County with 34 guys, and life was good. I was sober. I was, working, helping other people. I was, involved in recovery. I was coming to the Breakfast Club every day. And, I developed this persona of being on top of my game, but inside I was kind of raging inside. My wife saw the dark side of me, and, that all kind of fell apart. In 2009, she asked me for a divorce kind of out of the blue. And soon thereafter, I relapsed. So I had 10 years. I'm jumping around. I'm talking too much about my past. I want to talk about the future. So, I relapsed, in 2009. I gave up being an adult. My wife and I had a baby of our own who was 2 years old. And I gave up. And for the next 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, I became a chronic relapser. I used to joke about people coming in and picking up multiple white chips, and I became that guy. I couldn't get it together. And sometime after that, 2012 or something, I struggled, definitely, was back to doing my old things, ripping and robbing. I got locked up on several occasions. I went to RSAT, which was horrible. It's like prison rehab. And every time I get locked up, I'm back on the beam and I want to do the right thing. And I do. And, I got out, and my problem was about 4 or 5 months after I get out, I would relapse, because I wouldn't get a sponsor. I think I knew everything on my own, and, then I'd get lonely. I'd have some money in my pocket, and I would go back to using. And, I went to RSAT. I got locked up for about a year. I stayed out for about 14 months. Got locked up again. Went to prison for 2 years and got out. That was 2016. 2016, I got back out and, had some hiccups along the way. I got in another relationship with Josie, and that ended up, we broke up, and that sent me off on my last relapse. I had a 17-day relapse, and I ended up, catching 4 or 5 more felonies. And I I was in jail for like 10 months. And, now I'm in drug court in Cherokee County. I'm close to finishing that up. I'm about 5 months away from graduating. I'm kind of fast forwarding because I'm telling too much about, the bad stuff. When I got into drug court, I got into therapy, and I told this therapist, last time when I got locked up and on the 23rd or 24th of July, I'm like, I'm back here again. I've done that was the start of doing almost another year. I've done total about 8 years, a little over 8 years behind bars in my life. I have in the neighborhood of 50 plus felonies. I've lived a pretty crazy life. But I was sitting in the jail cell. I'm like, why the fuck do I keep coming back here? Why the fuck do I keep, going to this thing that just makes me miserable, And, I started thinking about this whole abuse thing that went on in my life. And it was the thing that I kept secret. It was the thing I didn't talk about. And it's the thing that kept me the sickest. And so, when I go to jail, I'm back on the beam and I'm reading the big book and I'm doing spiritual stuff. And this last time, I've really dug into that part of it. And when I got into drug court, I got put into therapy, and, I told the story, and I just told you that, that I was sexually molested for a long period of time. And at some point, my dad walked in, and nothing was done about it. And then I moved on and keep talking about it. And she's like, whoa, let's back up here. And I never looked at that part of it, that my dad did nothing until now. And I know now that was the most, I respect my dad. I love my dad. He's been dead for 15 years. But he dropped the ball when he did that, because for my expectation that day that happened was that he went and told my mom, and that my mom and my dad were going to say something the next day, and this person wasn't going to do this anymore, and it didn't happen, you know. So I'm thinking my self-worth was nothing back then, you know what I'm saying? And I'm digging up all this shit that went on in my life, but I'm like, you know, I thought my parents knew and just didn't give a damn about what was happening to me. So my self-worth was horrible. That's where all my anger issues came from. And up until I was about 40-something years old, I said something to my mom about it 8 years ago or so. And I thought that she knew this whole time, and she had no clue. So, you know, I carried this whole life of thinking my parents just didn't give a damn about me because they're supposed to protect me, and they didn't. So this time around, I've really dug through all that hurt and shame and anger, and I'm running out of time, but I feel like I haven't really done a good job doing this. But I think for me now, I have some anger relapses every now and then. Steve has seen me completely lose my mind in the past because he's worked for me. And it was just normal. And that's how I reacted. I broke shit. I hurt myself. I destroyed objects around me. I was never violent towards people. I'm pretty much a big teddy bear. But when I get angry, I turn into that 7-year-old boy that wasn't protected by my parents, you know. And that's how I dealt with that shame, that hurt, that fear, all that worry. And today, today I can trace back. I say it's almost like an arson investigator. If something affects me now and I get mad, and I'm getting way better with outbursts and dealing with anger because I recognize it and I've worked through it. But I can trace back that anger towards being that 7-year-old boy, you know. I think it's made a really profound change in the way I act and react to things. Like I said, I still have some slip-ups, but even when I have slip-ups, I go back and you know, review what happened and how I was feeling and make amends and whatnot. Today, I'm still working through the steps. I've taken this last year, really doing therapy stuff. I've just recently changed sponsors, and we're going through the steps again with him. Well, I'm going through steps again with him. But, you know, life is way better than it ever has been for me, because I've uncovered that secret, you know, and I talk about it. And I have a really good relationship with a higher power in my life. I do these meditations in the morning and these positive I am affirmations, and it really dials me into having serenity and being serene, and having some peace in my life. And for me, AA's been, you know, such a home for me. I keep coming back. I see it work in other people. And even when I was struggling and picking up white chips, and there's a time I picked up a white chip, and halfway through the meeting I went outside and, you know, used and came back in just because I needed to stay awake. And today I'm glad that that's all behind me. I feel like I regret how much time I've wasted in the program by not really being honest with myself and those around me. And but it takes what it takes, you know. And Keys of the Kingdom, this is my favorite paragraph. It says, AA is not a plan for recovery that can be finished and done with. It is a way of life, and the challenge contained in its principles is great enough to keep any human being striving for as long as he lives. We cannot outgrow this plan. As arrested alcoholics, we must have a program for living that allows for limitless expansion. Keeping one foot in front of the other is essential for maintaining our arrestment. Others may idle in a retrogressive groove without too much danger, but retrogression can spell death for us. However, this isn't as rough as it sounds, as we do become grateful for the necessity that makes us toe the line, and we find that we compensated for a consistent effort by the countless dividends we receive. And, you know, that's how I see AA. It's something that I'm going to do the rest of my life. I'm always going to be an alcoholic. And I've always got to be striving for something in AA. Complacency for me, is absolute death, absolute retrogression. Resting on my laurels, is a big problem for me. You know, when I had my halfway houses, people I'd introduce hey, I'm Adam. And they're like, oh, you're the Adam. And I would be like, oh yeah, the Adam, you know. But my ego got in the way a lot of times. I know the talk, I know the walk, but I definitely didn't practice what I preached in the past. This time around, I'm arrogant. I like joking it up and yucking it up. I wouldn't come to meetings if there wasn't laughter. You know, that we're no glum lot is big and important to me because, there's joy in these rooms. There's recovery in these rooms. There's horrible, hurtful pain in these rooms, but there's recovery in these rooms. And that's what I hold on to. I've seen some really dark places in my life. I've seen some really bad shit. And I've done a lot of bad things, and I feel like the amends I can make, a lot of it is living amends. I can't go say I'm sorry to everybody that I robbed and stole from. But by doing esteemable things and having some integrity, I feel like I can give back. And, you know, there's lots of times if I see somebody on the side of the road, I'd pull over and change their tire like, you know, a NASCAR crew because I got a jack and an impact wrench. And if you're out of gas, I'd pick you up, you know, stuff like that. Having the halfway houses, which at some point I intend to probably get back into, that's, you know, for me, that's me making amends for all the wrongs I've done in my life to the community. And I'm still a work in progress. I feel like I'm in a better place than I've ever been, because I'm finally, addressing the things that kept me sick. And, you know, they say, you know, your darkest secret keeps you sick. And now my dark secret is kind of out in the open, and it definitely doesn't have the power it used to have. And I've invited a higher power into my life, and I'm doing what's suggested, and I'm keeping my mouth shut more than, you know, I do speak, but, I'm way more open to suggestions now than I was in the past. And, you know, I've got a long way to go, but, I'm trudging along, and life has given back to me what it's taken away because I've done the right thing. You know, in Safe Haven, it talks about that, you know, that AA is like the power of an airplane, that the pilot has to do the right thing and God does the rest, you know, and that's how I feel like I'm doing. I'm doing what's in front of me, and I'm allowing God to guide me through it, and things are getting better. Another favorite thing, and I'm going to end in this. It says, this is one of my favorite sentences. It says, I get everything I need in Alcoholics Anonymous, and everything I need I get. And when I get what I need, I invariably find it was just what I wanted all the time. That's the last sentence on 552. And for me, what I have now is serenity, some hope, some peace, relief of this anger and these secrets I keep, and life is good. And with that, I will end it. Thanks.